we're going to move on to our 6.8, our 1 o'clock item. Consideration of letters to A, the United States Board on Geographic Names, Domestic Names Committee, and B, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names, recommending changes to BGN's principles, policies, and practices in light of the January 20th, 2025 Presidential Executive Order restoring names that honor American greatness. And Supervisor Pyska, you want to start out?
Yeah, thanks. This last year has been really difficult for everyone regarding this name change, and the executive order of President Trump to update the policies and procedures gives us the opportunity to share where we found those policies fell short over the last year, specifically around renaming populated places. It's much different to rename a town than it is a mountain or a creek. And so that's what's in these letters. And these are the issues that I've been pushing all year with both committees. And so I think it's important for us as a board to lean on our experience and push this forward, advocate for what we've been through for these changes.
All right. So we'll go ahead and go straight to public input. And if you would like to come up and speak on this item, please come up, state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
I just got a point of clarification, since I know a lot of people have been involved in asking for this to come back, but I specifically came to the board the beginning of January asking for the item 611 that was heard on December 10th to come back to the new board, to the board with the new board members so they could weigh in on that. And I had assumed all the time that that was going to happen in this meeting, and it's obviously not happened. And you and I had spoken about that a couple of times, that it was agendized with that in mind, but that's clearly not the case. And so I'm asking if that's going to be put back on so that we can discuss it.
All right. I'll defer to County Council.
Okay. I'm just going to wait up here because I may have a question of him, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item in particular specifically just refers to the 2 recommendations, each corresponding to the letter that's proposed letter to be sent to the BGN. The other item will be the one to be sent to CACGN. Generally, your board cannot add any items or actions beyond this item to be discussed in the agenda. So in terms of proposing new items, that's not before your board today. That goes through the normal standard procedure of consideration review, having a sponsor to be proposed to the board. That goes through staff review, that goes through the agendizing requirements, but the item itself is limited to just under A, the letter to BGN, proposed letter to the BGN, and B, the proposed letter to CACGN.
So just for clarity on that, and I knew that, I agree with you on that, but I figured I would take the opportunity just to say, reiterate one more time, this item was intended for my request. That's what my intention was anyway. And I think there's a lot of people here who intended to speak and address on that on both sides. And it appears as an end run to get away from having that tough discussion by not everybody on the board, but at least some. And so I guess we'll try it again to have that on there. There's at least one person in this room who was told that it wasn't going to be put on because of something to do with Robert's Rules of Orders, which is absurd, since Robert's Rules of Order is just a guideline. It has nothing to do with the law that runs the public meeting law that you are bound by. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I guess we'll make another request through another supervisor that will bring it to the chair at that time. And thank you.
And I just, real quick, Rob, I just wanted to let you know, I know we did discuss this. You brought it to us, I want to say, in the second meeting of January. And during that, I deferred to the district supervisor.
Correct.
And I usually do. So I know you requested it, yeah.
You and I had a very good discussion about it. I think you were put on you were doing your job as chair, and I appreciate that. I don't have any, I don't apply any fault to the way you handled it. I appreciate the way you did your job.
I see some pens up real quick. Did
Does he
you?
want to speak? Or, yeah, I did. But
Oh, you
if
wanna-
you want to leave it open for public speaking, I can wait.
Okay, okay.
May I speak?
Yes.
Not using about 3 minutes, just to what was raised, as opposed to general public comment. which I
Is it
would-
public input or are you,
On.
what are you speaking of?
I'd like to speak about how the board might bring a reconsideration back, if you'd be interested. Otherwise, I can skip it.
You want to, should we,
Well, this is still part of the public comment where each speaker can have 3 minutes, so your board can.
Okay, then I'll hold on that one and use my 3 minutes elsewhere. Thank you.
all right. Did you want to, go ahead, Helen?
Yeah, I was wondering, and this is actually a question for you, Mr. Lloyd. I know that there's been a lot of uncomfort and disagreement with the name change. In particularly, they didn't like the name Canocti. There was no input from the community in any way, shape, or form. And since I'm new to this, can I put a resolution forward to revisit the name of Kelseyville? It's not the same. Can I bring something forward onto the agenda? Revisit the naming of Kelseyville
If
for public input.
Thank you, Supervisor Owen. So if, in effect, that proposed recommendation or item will result in the reconsideration of your board's, of the board's December 10, 2024 action, under the Rules of Procedure, General Protocol, and Committees Policy of the County of Lake, in particular, Chapter 1, Section 3, Rule 9, that time has passed. The deadline to submit or propose a reconsideration of the board's action that took place on December 10 would have been the next regularly scheduled board meeting. There has been 3 regular board meetings since that time, and so under the current procedural rules, that time has passed.
I'm not asking to address the December 10th meeting. I'm asking if we can address the name of Kelseyville. People do not want the name Canocti.
Well, one option for the board or for a board member would be to consult with staff, because part of the review and the process there would be to coordinate and also finalize what would be the recommended action that would come out of the proposed item that you had in mind. So that would be my suggestion, to consult with staff moving forward. Obviously, it wouldn't be a part of the board's item for today.
No,
because-
no, I was wanting to put it back on.
Right.
Thank you.
So Supervisor Spatier?
And county council basically said what I was going to say, that I think that Supervisor Owen should meet with staff to figure out what the options are, rather than doing that right here, since right now we have a specific agenda item. But I will go ahead and make a brief comment. I'll make more later on. There's obviously confusion as to what this item is supposed to be. I'm not sure if people heard what the item was or if they actually read what the item was, but the majority of the public comments we received was basically December 10th type of public comments of whether they wanted to keep the name or change the name, not discussing the process in which BGN and CACGN follow. And so there was obviously some massive confusion, because the majority of the public comments that we received were not related to the item on the agenda. It was related very specifically to the foundation of the issue that we're kind of discussing here. So I think it's unfortunate that there was that level of confusion more often than not.
Can I just ask a question real quick of what Lloyd
Yes.
comments? So, the board policy, Robert's Rules of Order, Miss Manners, whatever you want to bring up, is superseded by the Ralph M. Brown Act, correct? Counsel?
I only respond to questions from
Okay,
your board. If your board gives me permission to respond, then I
I
will.
appreciate that, yeah, that's true.
And so you're saying
The
does
Brown Act supersedes all of these policies and procedures and all of that, these other recommendations and guidelines.
Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Brown Act gives authority to your board to create and establish your board's own policies and procedures when it comes to procedural matters to start. And that is what culminated in the Board of Supervisors Rules of Procedures, General Protocol, and Committees Policy.
All right.
Okay, but it's still, the Brown Act supersedes any of those rules if they conflict. The Brown Act on Rule 27 allows for reconsideration of any item that's been voted on by the board. And in this instance, it would be appropriate for one of the board members who voted in the majority on that decision on December 10th to bring forward a motion for reconsideration. The only board member here would be Chairman Crandall on that, and that motion would be made, it would be put on the agenda next week to make the motion for reconsideration, then it would be put on the following week or subsequent meeting to then allow for that item to be reconsidered. It can be done within 12 months of when that decision was made, not after the next meeting. It's within 12 months under that process. Otherwise, you have to wait the 12 months for any board member to then ask that it be put on for reconsideration. So that's the process that should be applied, not a board policy that was adopted arbitrarily for some other reason. But there is precedent already for this board to take up items for reconsideration, and I can name a few of them that if you need specific examples of precedent where the board has actually taken up items for reconsideration.
All right, so did you want to answer that, Lloyd?
Sure, just very briefly. So, Rule 9, and I'll try to be brief about this. Rule 9 of your board's County of Lakes Rules of Procedure, General Protocol, and Committees Policy outlines the requirements for considering a motion to reconsider a prior board action. So it has all those requirements there. I believe I've already referenced the requirement, the timeline requirement for that, in which the deadline for bringing up such item has passed. And this particular rule here, along with the rest of your board's rules of procedures that were adopted in 2018, I can certainly contend that those are compliant with the Brown Act.
And so with what was stated about one of the majority bringing it back, the time has passed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So the deadline is at the next, under Rule 9, under the deadline to bring up such an item to reconsider a prior board action was at the next regularly scheduled meeting after the action, subsequent to the action. That would be the action itself referenced. It occurred on December 10. The next regularly scheduled meeting that occurred then was December 17, 2024.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair, again, we get this debate all day long. There are consequences to violating the Brown Act. There are no consequences to violating or going against board policy. So the Brown Act is what I'm sticking to. And in addition to what I stated earlier, the member of the board that was in the majority can ask that it be reconsidered. However, I forgot to add that at the next board meeting, 4/5 of the current board would then have to vote in favor of in order to vote to reconsider that. So that is an important part. It can't be just 3 3-2. It has to be 4/5 vote in order to reconsider that. But again, I'm, with all due respect, and I'm not, nobody's ever paid me for legal advice, so you get what you pay for here. But you're bound more by the Brown Act and the consequences related to that than you are by any board policy that, that may have been adopted arbitrarily or for whatever reason at any time.
Right. Noted. Sir?
My name is Vern Belanger, and Helen, you were saying that nobody knew about the name change until recently. At the very first meeting that Citizens for Healing gave over 4 years ago, we had two members of the Kelseyville Business Association that showed up.
Sir, we're going to discuss the letters at hand. We're not going to rehash the name change debate. So if you...
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that
That's fine.
as a motion was made concerning what's not true.
Okay,
I
well,
think there's confusion about the confusion. I was talking about how people think we're talking about the name change today, but we're talking
Okay.
about a drafted letter.
Okay, thank
So
you, Bruno.
either we're not reading or we're not listening. Either way, we're not going anywhere if that's how we're going.
Okay, thank you.
all right. Thank you.
There really is no confusion. My name's Rachel White of Kelseyville. I spoke with Jessica last week. They gave me this excuse. I never asked for the vote on Measure U to be revisited. I asked to bring this back to the board for a discussion because of all the reasons that the original application should have been rejected based on the existing policies. And your letter also includes false information. They do have a procedure for accepting other names. No other names are accepted because we don't want to change our name, period. And we now know that at the federal level, it's not going to change. So your letter speaks loud and clear. You do not care about Kelseyville. You don't care about our reputation. You don't care about what's happened to us over the years. You don't care about the businesses. You do not care about the brand. Kelseyville's burning, and you are fanning the flames. This is a disgrace, and it should embarrass you. And your lack of leadership throughout this process is completely unacceptable. If you don't want to stand up for Kelseyville, then get out of the way. Our name is not changing, and we want to move on. This letter is another step in the wrong direction, and if you can't figure out where we're going, we need new leadership.
Is there anyone else that would like to come up and give some public input?
Mark Borgasani, Kelseyville. I'm not sure why we have to, the county, be the ones to direct the BGN and CACGN to rewrite their policies or to even call them out. The policies that they have don't support the name change in the application that was sent in. As Supervisor Owen stated, they'll say there was public, there wasn't. There was nobody that reached out and talked to the KBA about name change. They bopped their heads into businesses and, they'll tell you that they checked around, but they didn't. So why are we responsible if the BGN's policies don't support this? Canocti is not an acceptable name for Kelseyville. There was no input for that. It should just die. The application should just die at the BGN level because of lack of clarity or whatever. One could say that the lack of clarity at the BGN would be a way for this board to not support changing the name. We don't want it changed because your policies and procedures don't support it. I think we're going to find that, it's not going to get much better there. I think CACGN is just functional. I think you'll find that. So I hope that, my hope would be that we could readdress this somehow or address the fact that Canocti is not acceptable and that should be the end of it. There's been no discussion with anybody from Lake County or from Kelseyville. There was no discussions, from the tribes early on. This wasn't the tribes, it was Citizens for Healing threw this thing out there, and the tribes picked it up and ran with it. But I think we could have done more to talk about maybe geographic features instead of, they don't have any guidelines for this because nobody's done this. Change the name of a town of 10,000 people, changing our name. They haven't done it. So I really hope we can get something done here. The letter, I get why you're doing it, but I don't know if it's going to help anything up there. It might. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I guess you'll just have to take my off-topic proposal for the letters. Pack of lies.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Alan Fletcher, sorry, I said earlier, Alan Fletcher, Citizens for Healing, Lucerne resident. At our I wasn't on board, but Lorna can speak to it. At our first or second meeting, the cultural director of LM, the late Thomas Leon, came and talked to us right from the start. Not a random native off the street.
Alan, is this referring to the letters?
I am referring to the attacks that were just made and responding to the attacks made by those people, which are lies. And I am preparing a response for the CACGN meeting on February 28th, which will itemize every step of the way, who we spoke to, when we spoke to them, what they told us, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Their history is bunk. They accuse us of using inflammatory language, and they call us a mob and this, that, and the other. I will submit that to CACGN and copy you. Thank you. And if you want to call back and talk about my procedures that I propose for the letter, you can call me back if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the letters right here, or the comments. Right. Anyone else would like to come up and speak about this item? Anybody on Zoom? Do you want to speak first or after? Okay, so if you want to unmute and state your name for the record, and we'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay, so we have Fred.
Hello, this is Fred Briones. I'm calling in from my home at Canoctai. Sorry I did not come to the meeting. I don't have $5 to spend on white supremacy. And that's what this is. And I want to make it a fact and let everyone know that I want to tell them why the vote was non-binding. Because if it was binding,
Fred,
it would lead into one of the biggest civil rights lawsuits ever.
Fred, we're discussing the letter.
And I know I got 3 minutes here, and these people now need to realize that times are changing, and it's changing out of their favor. It's for the indigenous people and people of color that we are the original homeowners of this land, and they're going to have to understand that whole educational piece now, that this is our home, and if they don't like it, they could leave. This is Indian land.
Fred,
And realize where they're at.
let's
Thank
please
you.
stick to the letter. I understand, and I think we've hashed this out before. Let's
I support the name change. Leave it to Canoctai.
This isn't this item, Fred, is not about that. It's about the recommendations to the Board of Geographical Names and CACGN for policies. Did he? Okay. Is there? All right. I'll just in case someone else wants to speak. If not, I'll close public input. Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Sabatier.
Thank you. I feel like we're continuing to stumble in this really important but difficult conversation that I think our personal process has not been good. And before we tell someone else what their process should be changed, I think we need to review our process as a whole. Not that I even want to have that conversation either, but before we point a finger at someone else, we should be pointing it at ourselves. Some people left this room on December 10th feeling like they got slapped in the face, and I can't speak for individuals, but saying the process is flawed is also a slap in the face of the 30% who voted to change the name and got that name changed. The process worked for the 30%. So I just feel like we just are making wrong decisions on how to process through these difficult matters, and that we need to look internally before we reach out externally. And so I don't think we should be sending a letter today. And I don't think that we should. I'm going to make a request. I think there's been a lot of staff time spent on this difficult subject. But I would like to ask for staff not to spend time on this. If a board member wants to bring something, they can do that on their own. But we have staff that are spending hours of time in meetings, in drafting letters, in drafting memos, and we have that capability to do that ourselves. I want to see staff spent on the priorities that we have, which is to, I know I'm going to get a laugh from somebody in the audience, to make our communities better, economic development, better opportunities, all of that good stuff that we should be focusing on. This is not on the list of things that we're asking staff to work on. So that is my ask.
I don't know who's first. Supervisor Owen?
Go ahead. I forgot to take it down.
Vice Chair Rasmussen?
Yes, thank you. I do have a lot of concerns with sending a letter right now similar to what Supervisor Sabatier said. I think, the public just seeing this draft letter last week, on Thursday afternoon is not enough time. I think we ought to be engaging the community more as supervisors to work with everybody, get more input before we make decisions on this. I think that while I do think there are some issues with the federal policy, I also think that this board in 2024 could have taken a more active role in engaging the public, going out and facilitating meetings, and just working with everybody to try to work through this. I feel like it was just kind of out there, and we weren't involved until the board decided to put it to a vote. And then again, we just weren't engaged. I don't feel we were engaged. I think that's critical. I do think some of the federal policies are clear. What was clear to me is that, and this is, why my previous comment is that the Board of Names policy said that while they do accept public feedback, they don't rely on that as the primary source of their information. As I recall reading, they rely on the local governing body to figure out the best way to seek public input. That was my understanding of it. And, the board did come up with a way to do that. Not everyone is happy with, the final outcome, but nonetheless, the board made the decision that that's how they were going to seek public input. So I think, there's more involvement we can have. I think if we're going to send a letter, it needs more discussion in the public, more feedback from the public. I personally don't think the federal government ought to be involved in changing the name of a populated place anywhere in the United States. I don't see that as their job. They're not here. They're not part of this community or any other. The reason that they were created, in my opinion, was to regulate names of geographic places primarily on federal land. We have vast tracts of federal land. We're talking about geographic features. That's really what their mission ought to be. If we were going to send any letters, I don't think they ought to be involved in any of these decisions. I think it needs to be resolved within a local community with engagement of all stakeholders on all sides, try to work through it. So those are my comments at this time.
Supervisor Owen?
Yeah, I might add that the public comment or the public input was brought to us on a ballot. It was brought to the community, the entire Lake County, and it was the Board of Supervisors that asked to have that done. If that was to be ignored, it shouldn't have been put on the ballot in the first place. So I feel that that was our way of commenting, and when it came back to the board, we weren't asked for comment before that. So that's my feeling.
Yeah, and this has been really hard. This has been really hard for everyone. This hasn't been done before, as Mark mentions. It's been really frustrating to get the engagement that was really needed. And in the beginning, the California committee, the CACGN, told Supervisor Sabatier and I that they were assigning staff, that they were going to come out and do that engagement. They were going to do listening sessions. They were going to explain the process thoroughly. They were going to do all of these things. And then we had, a lot of questions to the BGN and the CACGN that we were not getting answers to. And we kept asking and pushing, and it finally became really clear that they were not going to show up and do those things that they said they were going to do, that we had asked them to do, that we needed them to do. And that's when I realized that was not going to happen. That's when I decided to bring the vote to the board so that we could really find out how the community felt about this. Because this whole time I've been really frustrated that the community wasn't more involved and there weren't more ways to participate. But on the other side of this, they weren't answering our questions and they weren't helping us with the material and the process that we needed to go out to the public. So if you say there should have been more community engagement, like what does that even look like? Because I can't answer everybody's questions. It's a federal process and it's a state process. So that's been really frustrating. So then we did the vote. We heard very clearly what the people wanted. And then the board voted a different direction. And here we are today. I did ask for that to be reconsidered, and I was told by county council it is not possible because of Rule 9. So this is what I felt like the very next thing that we could do is share the frustration that I have had over this last year with the lack of participation and engagement from both of these committees. And I have had a lot of conversations with our state and federal electeds to try and get more help around this because it's just inadequate. It's been inadequate since the beginning, and that's where these letters come from. It's the frustration because this was just dumped in our lap with no supports, and it's taken a lot of time and energy, and we're not, we knew from the beginning there was never going to be winners in this, and it's been really destructive in this community. It's been really sad to see. So here we are. This executive order pretty much says the name is not going to change. The Trump administration is taking this direction. They are completely gutting the BGN. They are replacing all of the BGN board members. The staff is gone, and the policies need to be rewritten. And so here's our suggestion if you're rewriting policies here. But at the end of the day, nothing is going to happen. If this committee ever reforms and is productive, it's going to take years to figure out any of this. And this file is never going to even get opened. So I don't really want to put any more time and resources into this because it's been a year. We're all really tired.
Can I speak?
Sure.
Yes.
A brief second? You know, back when I was campaigning, I don't know if I said this up here before, but I was invited to the very first ever Native American forum at Robinson. And it was really cool. I went, but the night before I did a lot of research, and the day before. So, because I knew this was going to be one of the questions. And I ended up finding a couple of different things. One of the things that I found out was that back in the 30s and 40s, they were calling, some of the trappers coming through the area were calling Kelsey Creek, Kelsey Creek. And that was before Andrew Kelsey came to this area. So I found that interesting. And actually, I've tried to find it again, and the only one I found, which I do have it here, was George Kelsey that that they believed was named, that the Kelsey Creek was named after. But so there was more than one Kelsey family in the area. So that was one of the things that I found was interesting. Secondly, I got really excited as I've talked to, I know some people about instead of upsetting and changing what's going on and going through all of this, couldn't we put together a culture center? And I think that would be phenomenal. And amazingly enough, on the December 10th, Mr. Rob Brown had brought up the same thing. He was right in front of me and had said it. It was like he read my mind, but I'm sure he came up with it just as independently as I did. And I brought that to the natives at that time because your story's not being told. It's not really out there. When I travel, I've been to a number of these monuments and Crazy Horse and such. And it's something to be revered. And I think we're missing the boat on this. I think we can make something positive out of this. And I would absolutely love to see a Native Culture Center here where you're telling your story not just back 100, 150 years, but thousands of years for that matter. And it could be interactive. And the kids can learn from that and on all walks of life, your story could be told. So that was something, and I've actually spoke with EJ about that, and I told him that's something I would absolutely love to work on.
And a memorial. We could do a memorial.
And so thank you for stating that.
I just got a question, and it's regarding this item, so about moving on. I don't know how.
So there's a hand up in Zoom, so I'll allow, let's one more, and then I'll allow the Zoom too. So I'll open public input one more. So if you want to come up.
So I'm going to stick with this item. I still, I'm not convinced that my request can be denied the way it was. But the concern I have is that no action is going to be taken, which probably shouldn't. The thing that should have happened because of all the things that Jessica's talking about, that the last letter that they still have should just say, don't stop with it, just don't do anything with it until we've had a chance to review everything. But what I've heard, and this, as the discussion goes in this from Jessica, is it's BGN's fault. It's Trump's fault. It's CACGN's fault. It's the board members that voted against the will of the vote. It's their fault. It's county council's fault because they gave me Rule 9. No accountability or admission that maybe there's a few things that you could have done way before this happened that would have kept all this from happening to get where we are right now. That's the one thing that's lacking is your admission that you should hold yourself accountable.
So if you're on Zoom, can you please unmute, state your name for the record, and Nora? You can unmute. All right, so, Nora, we've tried twice now, so we're gonna go ahead and close public input. If you can email or send something in to the clerk of the board, and we'll go ahead and put it on record, and go from there. So as we close public input, I don't know if there's any more statements, but I'll just make a brief one. This item, in discussing it with Supervisor Pyska and staff, was basically also addressing the executive order, because as it's written, they're going to replace the folks that are on that committee, and then create policies, reform those policies. And so that was, I think, the thought was to give some insight as to what's been done here, as it was one of the first type of situations with a populated town and whatnot. Other names and situations were SQ names and rocks and mountains and things like that. And so this was giving them the idea and the experience we had, as it basically put us in a position as a county to have separate in a divisive and difficult time while discussing this and getting through it. And so for me, I wanted to make sure we, in essence, paid it forward, so no one else had to go through this again. Because in my mind, I think we all know the way that I voted. However, knowing how this goes now, it more than likely isn't going to happen with the diminishing of the department. So with that whole situation, after all of what we went through, is a moot point. So for me, that's what this letter was to me, was to give them some insight and say, hey, to ensure another community doesn't get broken apart by this type of vote or whatever the case may be, discussion, here is some insight, and we would like to pay that forward. And in knowing too that we're not really even going to have this progress. So that was my mindset with discussing this. Also, it was never a vote to change it. And I think one of the first statements I ever made when it comes to that was, if there was at this board level, it would always be a tug of war back and forth. It would just always be that way. And that's why, when people approach me about it, I never wanted to bring it here. And I don't think anyone wanted to, because it just would have always been that way, no matter what. And then the BGN application came, and then all the other stuff. So even when I was approached about it by different groups, it was the same. It was like, look, do something else, because it's just going to keep going back and forth one time or another. And so with all of that, that was my goal, was to give some insight to crafting the policies and whatnot, and going from there. So that was the intent, and I understand that, and when I talked with Rob, I mentioned, I understand this isn't exactly what you wanted. I defer to the district supervisor, and as you were saying, you spoke with the county council and staff, and was advised that that's not something we can revisit or reconsider. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that and state that for everyone to know, I didn't want to not say nothing, and sit here. So yeah, that's what I'll state. And I don't know where we'll go from here, but yeah, if there's not any other comments. Lloyd? It looked like you wanted to say something, that's all. No? All right, sorry. I closed public input.
I have one question. If it's not addressed at the federal level and the letter is still there, excuse me, after a certain time period, could they bring it back up, a change of regime, a new president? Could that come back up and our letter is still in there asking to have it changed to Canocti? Or will it drop off and go away? That's my question.
From what I read, they're going to also look at all of the submissions and consider if they're even going to be addressed, the new appointed group. That's my interpretation of what I read. but I'm not at, I'm not at that
So
level
we
of.
could then write letters as what the public could go ahead and put letters in.
The public could definitely send their letters in. Supervisor Sabatier?
And I would say that includes Board of Supervisors who have letterheads that if they wanted to write individual letters, have the right to do so, because they could do so anytime for anything, as long as they don't represent the
group.
board in those letters.
Perfect.
That would, just want to make sure we hammer that in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Supervisor Owen's question, so in terms of whatever letters that correspondence, that whether it come from the county, members of the public, going to BGN, in terms of what BGN does with it or what the retention is, that would I would probably have to defer to BGN's own policies and procedures on how long they would retain such
Okay.
documents. And
Thank
just-
you.
And just for further clarification, because I did mention that your board does have the authority to enforce rules and regulations necessary for the government of the board. That's under the government code, actually, 25003, which is separate from the statutory Brown Act provisions, but it is within the government code, just for clarification of what I said previously.
Thank you. So with that, any other discussion?
I could take action. Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the letters A to the United States Board on Geographic Names, BGN Domestic Names Committee, and B, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names, CACGN, recommending changes to BGN's policies, or principles, policies, and practices in light of the January 20th, 2025 Presidential Executive Order restoring names that honor American greatness, and authorize the chair to sign.
Do I have a second?
Okay.
And the motion dies. So with that, we'll go ahead and close this item with no action taken from motion, not passed, motion moving forward. So, all right.